Hey all, and welcome to Shadow Space. And today we are commenting on another BCP video. This is titled, Liberal Media Terrified as Democrat Operatives Admit Defeat to Trump Confirming Nightmare Scenario. This was uploaded May 10th. This is being recorded May 11th. And link is in the description.
Racial redistricting.
On the campaign
you literally are taking Memphis, which is a city that with black voters, and you split it in three, stretching 3,000 miles.
Who's the current Democrat congressman there? What is it? A black congressman?
Just because black people are allowed to like people that don't look like them.
Exactly, and that is the point I wanted you to make. Because just because you're not going to have a black congressman, why is it that a Republican can't do just as well representing black voters as a Democrat?
Because
why
they
does
aren't
your race,
electing.
Why does your race determine your politics?
It doesn't. It does. No. You're making.
It does. You put all of those black people in the same district so that they could all be represented.
My point, actually. The assumption is black people. No. The assumption is black people will only elect black people. No, black people are smart enough to elect.
I mean, one, yes. Two, it doesn't say that they will only elect black representatives. But you are saying that they will only elect Democrat representatives, which arguably is just as wrong.
Nope, let me finish. Black people will elect people who will actually represent them, who have their best interests in heart. And what Republicans have done in Tennessee is dismantle the power for black people to have their voice. They did the same thing in Texas because they said they thought Latinos were going to swing.
I mean, arguably you could say that they split up the vote of Memphis, but that's not what you're saying.
For Republicans. There are black people that are represented. I'm black and I got a Republican president right now. Black people don't elect black people based on race. They elect people that are aligned with their their beliefs in justice.
So what?
And just took that away.
The president, there can only be one of them.
From them in Tennessee and in other states.
I just disagree that the only kind of a politician who can elect black people in Congress must be a Democrat. This is just an artificial.
That's not what I'm saying.
The Democratic
That's
Party.
not what I'm saying.
Black voters are still.
But that is what the Civil Rights Act says, is that because you are black, you are assumed to vote Democrat, and therefore they draw lines racially and then give those racially drawn lines to Democrats.
Fully franchised and go vote for whoever they want.
That's not
it
what
just
I'm
doesn't
saying.
have to be a Democrat.
Well, I mean, Brad, to your suit.
Boy. So we got to continue our coverage of the mainstream liberal media, who is currently in full-blown panic mode.
Because, I mean, really, it's the fact that your federal government is not a democracy. Your federal government is, for all intents and purposes, an oligarchy. You elect one single person to represent an entire group of tens of thousands of people. Ultimately, there's a good chance that some people in that system aren't going to be represented.
Full-blown cope and seethe mode over the fact that the Supreme Court took a sledgehammer
Because some people will have, because there are potentially endless ways that you can approach an issue. Not every approach is going to be there isn't an approach that isn't going to harm someone. It's entirely possible that you will get two people that you're supposed to represent where one of them wants you to go in one direction and the other person wants you to go in the opposite direction, and these two things don't intersect at all. They're completely opposing.
their precious,
Like trans people in sports. You can't both allow trans people to be in sports and not allow trans people to be in sports.
Section 2 of the voting.
So if you represent a population that has trans people and they want to be in sports, but the majority says, no, we don't want you to be in sports, what do?
Rights Act, okay, which basically allow for racialized gerrymandering. And the Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to be having segregated districts, right? We're supposed to be moving past Jim Crow, right? We're supposed to be moving towards a more race-neutral society. But that is the last thing that Democrats and liberals want, okay, which is why they have been boo-hoo-whining and crying since this ruling came down. And particularly on MS Now, they have not been having a great week, right? The viewership has not been good for them lately, okay? I mean, they've lost a whole lot of viewers because Democrats have been taking blow after blow after blow. In court, they wasted millions of dollars that they could have used during the midterms on the Virginia maps, okay? Democrats gerrymandered that state, and it got overturned by the Supreme Court because Democrats didn't follow the Constitution. So they just wasted tens of millions of dollars. They're not going to get the maps they want, and they're going to lose the so-called redistricting war against Republicans. And they're realizing this reality, and this is why they're currently seething on national television. The lawyers for Democrats, that is, the people who are challenging this stuff in court, they're currently seething on MS Now over the fact that they've been defeated when it comes to this redistricting issue. Take a look.
Politics will be politics. But the reason why I am so angry is because the Supreme Court of the United States chose to strike down a law that was passed in 1965 that Congress was in dialogue with the court.
What does it being passed in 1965 have anything to do with anything? Why does that matter? I don't know why that's relevant. They all say it. I don't know why it matters.
Over in the 1970s and 1980s. And for the last 40 years, we have lived under a set of principles that all players have accepted as a fair, level playing field. And then...
Yeah, but the problem is that, one, laws can change. Two, interpretations of laws can change.
A group of white Louisianans decided to challenge a map, and the U.S. Supreme Court ordered the parties to argue a case that none of the parties wanted, which was whether the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was still in effect under the right test. And then the parties did it, and they chose to issue an opinion in the middle of May while primaries were going on. And then the U.S. Supreme Court thought, you know what? Sure, we let black voters wait 2 years and vote under illegal maps, but God forbid these white voters have to do the same in Louisiana. That would be a constitutional crisis. And against all of that backdrop, have we learned nothing? I mean, have we learned nothing? Has the broader legal community not learned anything?
No.
Other than the civil rights groups, have people not learned that when you do this?
Yes, of course. There's a group that has it figured out, but just no one is listening to them, obviously.
To black voters, it turns out bad for democracy for everybody.
Well,
so yeah.
I didn't think in a multicultural society, I didn't think I had to assimilate. I thought that people were allowed to believe what they believed and express their cultures how they wanted to, and they didn't have to assimilate to everyone else. Now you're saying that they do. So which is it? I always get confused.
I'm angry because of the appalling silence that's going on right now around this case and the aftermath.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole lot of
Appalling
anger.
silence.
Okay? And again, the anger here has nothing to do with
the Republican, supposedly they're bringing litigation against the Republican maps. People aren't being there was because I queue up the tabs. I've been queuing up the tabs, and I saw that the one guy just they were blowing foghorns, and they were making a whole bunch of noise, and they were yelling while the vote was going on. What are you talking about? They're being silent.
so-called black voters being disenfranchised. It has everything to do with
this guy literally took that entire demonstration and just wrote it all off as useless.
Black voters not being able to come together as a district and to vote Democrat, right? That is
Amazing.
what they're really mad about. They're mad about Democrats losing power and control. That is
Mm-hmm.
really what
Well,
they're
yeah.
concerned about. They don't give a damn about black voters. If those black voters were voting Republican, they wouldn't care, right? This wouldn't be an issue. It's only because they vote Democrat. But the reality is that, again, when it comes to the issue of redistricting, the Republicans have more ammunition. Okay, you have more states. You have South Carolina, Alabama, others joining in on trying to get more House seats. And Democrats don't have any more ammunition, right? They're out, right? They're out of ammunition. After Virginia, there's not really that much else they can.
Well, I mean, really, their only recourse is to appeal and to try this stuff in court. I mean, this is like I keep seeing in my news sometimes this thing where it's like they only need one vote for impeachment. When you can find an impeachable offense that he's done that you can actually impeach him on, until then, it doesn't matter. You can't just say I personally don't like how he is running the government, so I want to get rid of him. You have to find something that he's done that's an impeachable offense, and then see if you can get the vote for impeachment.
Do. And that is the reality check that's going to be delivered to this BSNL panel who desperately wants to know
This is
if
like,
there's any.
don't follow illegal orders. Okay, when they give me an order that sounds illegal, I won't follow it. Until then, I'm going to keep doing what I'm told. Like,
Thing that Democrats can do in order to turn the tables when it comes to this issue of redistricting. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
Us through what the overall consequences are for democracy, because it feels like we are racing toward a landscape, a context in which even if Democrats win big this year, they probably win small.
I know she's so disappointed to say that, right? Because everybody thought there was going to be a giant blue wave, right? And this is why I continue to tell people that, hey, I'm not a doomer. Let's wait and see. There's still more time. There are things that can change going into the midterms. A blue wave is not guaranteed, right? If you look at the crystal ball for the 2026 House races, after the Virginia redistricting got struck down, Republicans have an advantage. So you're talking about 211 Republican seats versus 208 for Democrats, and then you have 16 toss-ups. So with 16 toss-ups, it could go either way, right? Democrats are going to need to overperform, right? They're certainly going to need to overperform, but even if they overperform, Republicans could still end up barely keeping the House. So this is what these individuals are really concerned about, right? They're concerned that now all of a sudden the blue wave narrative for Democrats is going away. And keep in mind, this is because of what they did backfiring, right? This is because Democrats got greedy. They should have stopped at California. If they would have stopped at California, a lot of this probably would not have happened.
they shouldn't. I don't want to blame one person, but it's one where, again, this redistricting should happen. Treating it like it's a war, treating it like it's a competition, instead of what's supposed to happen, I assume, which is both sides come together and agree on a map together so that no one has hurt feelings like this. Instead, it's maximum warfare all the time, everywhere. Like, and he doesn't give a damn.
But because they got greedy and they tried to do it in Virginia, they got slaughtered. It backfired. Because it just ended up motivating the GOP to fight fire with fire. And turns out we got more ammunition than the Democrats do. They're out. They're out. And again, this is why they're so angry, they're so upset. There's not that much more Democrats can do. They can't out gerrymander us because Democrat states have already been gerrymandered to the max.
And we may be leading in or walking into a world in which basically we are enshrining potential minority rule going forward, where one side can win 55% of the vote and still lose.
I see it as a lot more stark than that, actually. I start by saying that what we're seeing is the intentionality by Republicans to make sure Obama did not have coattails. Democrats lost 1,000 state legislative seats while Obama was president. That's not an accident, because what they're doing is pushing all of these policies to the states. There are, 23 states with a Republican trifecta, 26 that have Republican governors. So when we think about what's next for Democrats on this issue of voting rights and redistricting, I should say, I get nervous because there isn't a lot of room left, right, to be able to fix this, number one. Number two, I said this when Texas entered the fray to try to do their redistricting, and I said, this is going to be tantamount to an American version of apartheid.
Entered into the fray. It's just more wartime rhetoric.
Because it's not just about congressional seats. What the congressional seat allows states to do is then redistrict state legislative seats, city council seats, all the way down to even school board elections, right? So when you think about the removal of the civic opportunity, civic engagement for Black people, the fact that the president reclassified certain jobs where there are concentrations of women, particularly women of color, as professionals, making it difficult to get student loans, restricting now with the Supreme Court's help who can go to college and what colleges they can go to, and then how many hundreds of thousands of African American women lost their jobs. So there's also an economic attack on African Americans here.
Well, what he actually means is that there's an attack on the Democrat Party. That's what he actually really means. At some point, Black folks got to get tired of these mouthpieces using Black people for political gain, right? In order to push the Democrat Party agenda, because that's all this is about. This guy is trying to tell us, right? This is what he's arguing, that it is apartheid not to allow Black districts, right? Isn't segregation a component of apartheid, right? To me, it sounds like Black districts may be closer to apartheid than having districts that aren't divided based off race, right? But he's essentially making an argument that not having racial districts is apartheid. It doesn't make sense, right? Because it's not supposed
But then not all states draw their districts this way. I would get it if it applied to all states at the same time, but it doesn't. So
it makes sense outside of the context of, well, this is about Democrats, not Black people.
So when you put those two things together, to me, it says,
I mean,
you're trying to centralize through our entire federal bureaucracy and have it trickle down to the states the restriction of Black civic engagement and economic empowerment. That, to me, rings very true.
How does any of this disincentivize Black civic engagement? Black people can still run for these seats. I don't understand. They're having to appeal to a wider net. That doesn't mean that they can't do that.
To, an American version of apartheid that is not easily unshakable in the near term.
So the question is, do the Democrats have any legal recourse here with all of this?
1 second. I have to go. Just 1 second. We're back. I don't understand how drawing districts specifically around Black people is not segregating people based on race. You have to explain that one.
Redistricting that's taking place there, try to level the playing field, or is it just going to come down simply at the ballot box that they're going to have their best and final chance at regaining power?
I don't think they have much legal recourse. They certainly don't have legal recourse in Virginia. This is an independent and adequate state ground, which means that the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't really have jurisdiction to overturn what happened. There are some areas. Florida is facing a challenge to its redistricting effort, which is effectively in place but subject to a challenge that is still ongoing. But those are long shots in terms of legal challenges. Basically what has happened, and I am less optimistic than many people. I don't know. I think that we could end up with 60% of the vote producing 40% of the seats. Let's be, I mean, this is very, very stark. I mean, Antonio says I bring it down, but like realistically.
And I agree, but I agree with you.
Basil and I were talking earlier. I mean, this is.
Boy, look at these people, bro. They look terrified. She looked terrified, bro. Look at her face. She looked terrified. She said, oh, Democrats are losing power. There might not be a blue wave. Trump is going to win. Right?
He already did win. He's already in there. It's too late.
Oh, this is hilarious. Absolutely hilarious.
Earlier, I mean, it is not just grim. It is really, really grim. And the only way that I see forward is to fight.
Okay, it's not grim, guys. It's really, really grim.
The gerrymandering with gerrymandering, which we both hate. I mean, it's bad for democracy.
But it's legal. So don't get mad. Don't get mad at it, especially when you use it.
But it might be necessary for democracy in the short run, and then perhaps.
I mean, listen to this. There's no reason for you. We can all agree that it's horrible, and you should never use it. But there are times that you should use it, and so it's good that we have it.
2030, which feels like cold comfort, maybe 2040, you can get a federal ban on partisan redistricting. Because let's be clear.
Let's just use it until we get enough power and control that we own everything. And then we can just get rid of it so that Republicans can't use it against us.
A big part of the reason that we are in this apartheid, the resegregation, is the U.S. Supreme Court. 1980s John Roberts in the Reagan administration dreamed of where 2026 John Roberts has gotten America.
And let me just say that.
Yeah. So, you know what I find to be so hilarious about this, right? This idea that, oh, well, if you put Democrats in charge, they're going to get rid of partisan gerrymandering. And I'm like, in what world, if Democrats actually took back power and control, would they voluntarily give it up? Think about that, right? Think about that. That's why I'm like, this whole like talking point about, oh, well, Democrats support.
I mean, it's the same idea. It's the same idea that Trump is going to get rid of term limits so that he can just stay in there forever. It's the idea that once they're in power, once they have firmly taken control of the wheel, then they won't need tools like gerrymandering. They will already have so thoroughly broken the system that it only works for them that they won't need it anymore.
Banning partisan gerrymandering, I'm like, it's such nonsense, right? It's so nonsensical. Democrats will never take back power. They will never be in a position of power and then turn around and pass legislation that takes away their power. They're never going to do that. They're never going to do it. Because if they can win with partisan gerrymandering, then there's no reason for them to get rid of it, right? Getting rid of it, by definition, would undermine their power. Because they have to give up some of their Democrat seats. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. They have to allow some of the Northeast to be red. They're not going to do that, right?
We'll see, but
They're not going to do
by then they would already add provisions to the Civil Rights Act saying that, like, majority Republican districts had to have at least had to have at least one seat of Democrat representation for all the Democrats that aren't fairly represented in those districts. They would just make up more absurd, more ridiculous rules to just cement their power.
Yeah, they have to give us more
until
seats.
it didn't matter. Right? You set the board, you make all the districts, and then you make it illegal to ever redistrict ever again. You don't need gerrymandering anymore because it's already done.
They have to give us some more seats in New York and some of these blue states. They're not going to do that. If anybody believes that Democrats are going to voluntarily nuke themselves by banning partisan gerrymandering, you're an idiot. You're a complete and total idiot.
Because if that were true, then they wouldn't use it in order to gain their districts, in order to get their representation. They wouldn't have to.
It's such a silly talking point. It's such a silly thing for them to say. The pretend as if Democrats actually support that. No, they don't support that. Of course they don't support it. What Democrats would do is that they would sue red states. They would not allow red states to do what red states want to do, and they would allow Democrats to do whatever Democrat states want to do.
Well,
that's what Democrats actually...
Which is the point that he brought up, which is they already are doing things. Which again, to that person at the beginning of the video's point, like, no one is being silent about this. That's absolute nonsense.
We believe in, right? Let's be real. So what you see here is full-blown panic. These people are currently panicking over what happened because the Democrat stunt has officially backfired. And there's not much that they can do about it. That's what they're really upset about. They're upset about the fact that, hey, ain't really much we can change. We have some legal challenges in Virginia and Florida, but they're long shots.
That's what they got.
And there's not that much that Democrats can do. There's not that much more gerrymandering they can do. They can't really do that much more. They're cooked, right? They're cooked at this point, going into the midterms on this specific issue. So the only thing left for voters to do is to vote, right? The only way that this backfires on Republicans is if we do not show up to vote. We have to show up to vote. In fact, this makes it even more urgent that we show up to vote because we have to make sure that these new red districts stay red. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a black...
Well, because, right, I mean, supposedly out in Texas, they didn't even put it to a vote. They just redrew the maps, the court certified it, and those are the maps now. It's one, again, I don't know the process in a lot of these places. I imagine they're different because it's probably because the procedure is probably on a state level as opposed to like a nationalized federal level. But I have no idea. And that's, I don't know. I suppose that does make sense. But at that point, you might as well, if you're already going to break up all this representation anyways into these big long districts, then I don't know why you don't just do what I say and count up the Republicans and count up the Democrats and then just assign seats based on population. That way, not necessarily worrying about districts. I don't know what breaking them up into districts does. Again, when people were more clustered together and there was less communication, that made sense. Now with social media and stuff, I don't know how necessary that is. I don't know.